Now it seems to be working. I'm glad that it's only been trivialities spoken. We are here on page 321, and it's really beginning the last 400 pages of the book. But symbolically, at least, we should begin here, just for a change of pace. Ah, yes, I know. I said something very important about rest being a change of labor. That's what it was. He says some amazing things, you know. He says, when will you finally realize that obstacles are possibilities? This is one he repeats all the time, Master M. Obstacles are possibilities. Is that our first reaction to an obstacle, or do we choose to complain? What do you think? I don't know, maybe you're one of those who really agrees that obstacles are possibilities, right? So if this book seems too hard to assimilate, remember that obstacles are possibilities. He says, you know, without the enemy, you will not achieve. He talks about Akbar calling to his counselor to bring him a list, his enemies' list, to see if any worthy name had been added, because he knows that he will develop his own capacities based upon opposition, because for him obstacles are possibilities. A very first-rate attitude, isn't it? Okay, introductory remarks. We now come to the final part, only 400 pages long, of a treatise on the seven rays, and I have in mind three things which it appears to me to be necessary to do. These three will make this treatise not only the textbook of the new psychology, that's the whole treatise, right? The whole treatise of 5 books, but also a more vital factor in the human consciousness, because the fact of initiation will be emphasized, and these 3 are. You know, do you think the Tibetan was strategic in making Initiation, Human and Solar his first book? What do you think? You know, what is it about the human psyche that wants to advance, wants to break into new territory, does not want to be? It's the freedom element, isn't it? It's very interesting. What is the planet of freedom? Planet of freedom especially. Uranus? Of course. Uranus, of course. Liberation, freedom. And the very first initiation at which Uranus plays a dominating role is the first. Well, it is. But the initiator is not symbolized by Uranus until the third initiation. See, for the first 2 initiations, the initiator is Neptune, isn't he? Because Neptune is Vishnu, is Christ. Those ideas go together. But the electric fire of the monad is at first released, in some small measure, at the 3rd degree. So Uranus is, we're told, the Hierophant. Uranus, the Hierophant of the 3rd, which is really the first initiation. Anyway, we have to somehow find a way to think this book and the other books into the human consciousness. You know, it exists to a degree, but it is not appreciated as widely as it could be. DK said, well, you know, you have no idea how many readers I have. I have many more readers than you suspect. And we hope that that is the case. Even some of the early theosophists who really had their hand, you know, out towards Alice Bailey and said none of that, were closet readers of DK. It's just obvious by what they said and how they said it. So to think these books into the public consciousness is a very important task, because it will improve people's appreciation of the divine plan. And the appreciation of the divine plan will give stability to human consciousness in a time when it is remarkably unstable. I don't know if you're gathering that impression from the news, that people are going slightly crazy, you know. But I just see things in the news that I can hardly believe, because they show a total disorientation of human consciousness. At the same time, so many members of the New Group of World Service are working positively and actually getting something done. So anyway, these 3 things, very interesting that this 5-volume thing, 5-volume presentation, is the textbook of the new psychology. And also a more vital factor in human consciousness. I don't, I wish I could say that that is happening. But my impression is that the Bailey books are not becoming a more vital aspect or factor in human consciousness. I don't know if the modern esoteric bookstores are any indication. I think it's sometimes people consider it too difficult. They've lowered their standards, It used to be that you would actually want to strive to do something well, and now it seems you want to get instant gratification. So we have our work cut out for us in the second ray ashram. And, everybody that clusters around these books, their monadic ray or their soul ray or both are on the second ray. If they don't have some strong second ray aspect to their nature, they just don't stay with these books. Okay, so these 3 factors are, he says, I propose to deal with the theme of initiation in order to prepare the world of men for the restoration of the mysteries. When we think about the restoration of the mysteries, what comes to our mind? Anything? Restoration of the mysteries. When did the mysteries exist? What were they? They were, you work in them, in the mysteries. Yeah, you guys are pretty far away from me, and so unfortunately I try to hear the best I can. The temples of initiation are coming back now. And in the old days, there were the rites and ceremonies of the initiates in various societies, and they revealed many secrets of the kingdom of heaven to those who were worthy to enter. Now, we're told that the Christ will exoterically perform the first and second initiations in a way that can be viewed by humanity. Isn't that an interesting idea? It's not yet. He will be with us for 2,000 years, so it's not yet. I wonder if it's going to be perhaps when Mercury becomes powerful in the age of Aquarius. When is that? When will Mercury become powerful in the age of Aquarius? What am I talking about now? Divisions of the age of Aquarius, right? You know this. You do know this. I assure you, you know this. Every 720 years, we have a change of decanate in Aquarius, right? So we begin with the Saturn decanate, don't we, in general? And then we move to the Mercury decanate, don't we? That's when I think, that Mercury restores sight to the blind. That's what the mysteries do. The ancient mysteries of initiation, established exoterically, and that's what we're working towards. Masonry is working towards that. Even the new church will work towards that, and the banded esoteric groups, of which our kind of group is an example, they will work towards that as well. All of them will present their candidates to the initiator, basically to the mysteries of initiation. The whole element of mystery surrounds initiation. Why should that be so? I mean, why should there be mysteries? Rather than just talk about everything for everybody. What do you think? It's dangerous for people. Yeah, dangerous for people. Not on the right energy level. Yes, knowledge is power, right? We see that. So now you understand, or we understand, why the hierarchy didn't want or didn't think that humanity would discover atomic energy until the age of Capricorn. We're not ready. In many ways, we're not ready for it. So it's part of the forcing process, isn't it? Okay, so the restoration of the mysteries is coming. By the way, I want to show you this quote about Masonry, if I can. It's, here it is. It's about Masonry. The Masonic movement, when it can be divorced from politics and social ends, and from its present paralyzing condition of inertia, and this is changing now, will meet the need of those who can and should wield power. It's a first-ray school. Masonry is a first-ray school. And here is the statement, and very important about Masonry. And you know Keith Bailey, many of you, my associate, and very powerful worker in all this field. He's really doing a lot of this reformation of Masonry. And this is the quotation that's important. It is the custodian of the law, the home of the mysteries, and the seat of initiation. So through the Masonic fraternity, there will be much initiation given out to humanity when it is revitalized and when its true esoteric basis is understood. I've been in the Masonic Lodge now for 38 years, and I know that in general it isn't what it could be. In general, it doesn't live up to its esoteric possibilities. But now some of the work, Alice Bailey started a Masonic movement. Do you know that? She did. She called it Ancient Universal Mysteries, and I believe she called it that. Anyway, that's what Keith is calling it. It's a kind of a continuation, in a way, of that movement that began with her. And through each of the three groups, initiation will come and the mysteries will be discovered through Masonry, through the new church, and through the banded esoteric groups, organisms. Initiation will come, and Masonry will be on the first ray, the church on the second ray, and the banded esoteric organisms on the third ray. And thus the needs of all these different types of people will be met. He calls them all organisms. Okay, DK is going to give some definite teaching on the centers from the planetary angle and also from the angle of the individual aspirant, so we can know, what you say, more technically the energy sources that we are working with and what needs to be stimulated and what needs to be related. He will also, he says, endeavor to relate the 7 ray energies to the 5 and the 7 initiations, and to the 3 and the 7 centers in a new and more arresting manner. That's very promising.
Michael, the reason why Masonry is banned by the Catholic Church, by the Pope, is that because they are afraid of it?
Yes. The question is about whether the Catholic Church has banned Masonry because they are afraid of them. Actually, what the Catholic Church did, interestingly enough, is it created its own Masonic order called the Knights of Columbus. And because they realized it was such an appeal through form and ceremony and ritual that they had to have something to parallel Masonry. And Masonry basically insists on the freedom of the human being. And we know that there have been periods of the Catholic Church with its third-ray personality and sixth-ray mind, and seventh-ray physical nature, where the emphasis has been on ignorance, the preservation of ignorance, and keeping people in a benighted state. Even now, the symbol of the Vatican Library is with us. I mean, who knows what's in there? But the Church is not saying. See what I mean? In other words, is this information shared with humanity? No, it is not. So because there's many things which are very revelatory and maybe damaging to the specific authority of the Catholic Church. I mean, how long can one think of the Pope as infallible? We have to be realistic, don't we? So these are very old thought forms, and they will fade out with the Piscean age. Yeah, Lena? Yeah.
I have learned that one way of Freemasons developed because of it has to be free in their minds, free of dogmatism.
Now you say the Freemasons, free of dogmatism, yes. Look, Masonry is as old as Lemuria, okay? It's Egyptian in its nature, it's Atlantean, it's the whole rite and ritual of the spiritual hierarchy. But they could not accept the authoritative sixth-ray dogma of the Church, and they rebelled against that, and many of the rituals have that flavor of resisting Catholicism. So, but the new Masonry will be entirely different, The New World religion and the New Masonry will go together closely. Masonry is all about building the causal body. You are becoming, a Mason is someone who lays brick after brick after brick. So there's operative Masonry and speculative Masonry. Speculative Masonry is considered the more philosophical side, and it has to do with building the Temple of Solomon. What is the Temple of Solomon? Temple of Solomon is your causal body. So it has to do with building virtue into people. That's what it's all about. And it has nothing to do with accepting the authority of some divine pronouncement, Nothing at all. And Masonry is on the 7th ray and the 1st ray, 1, 4, and 7. So it is quite different from, it's not a Piscean organization, not meant to be. All right, so these are the 3 factors that he's going to deal with here. But also a more vital factor because the fact initiation will be emphasized. Okay, 3 things which appear necessary to do, and this is what he's going to do here. Initiation will be dealt with, the centers will be dealt with, and the rays in relation to the initiations will be dealt with. Okay, this, he says, is a large order, and one not easy to fulfill because so much has already been written or given out on initiation. The subject is dangerously familiar. What can he mean by that? Our subject is dangerously familiar. What do you think? Because when something's so familiar, what kind of attention do you pay to it? What's your action? Oh, I know that. Oh, that's been said. I know that, So you don't even think. In other words, someone can give you the greatest truth, but if you've been somehow exposed to it before and have made up your mind that you know something about it, you dismiss it. You don't take it in. Well, he has huge glamours and illusions to protect against, to destroy with this new teaching. By that I mean that certain preconceived ideas are already present in men's minds, and many of these are not factual in nature and need to be discarded or at best reinterpreted. So much, that's out there in the spiritual world is just a lot of nonsense, really. And people, because they have the will to believe, they are believing it. And they're running around with their head filled with glamour, seeing and misinterpreting everything, and they call that spirituality. And when it comes to the real stuff, like Blavatsky gives or Alice Bailey, it's too hard. They don't want to spend the effort to really learn it. That's the situation we face. So if some of you have in you the desire to teach, and you do that, I know a number of you already do that. Look, it's the clarification of people's consciousness that is so necessary. And that means our own consciousness has to be relatively clarified in order to help clarify it. Otherwise, we're just going to be the blind leading the blind. Which seed group is connected with the clarification of consciousness? There are 10 seed groups. Number 2. And there, I believe it is the, I was just going to give you some chakras that are involved in this. The head is always involved, and the solar plexus, I believe, is involved. The question is it the heart center? So I'm going to go here to right around page 40 of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. And, oh, that's the wrong one. I didn't press that. All right. I want to see what chakras. Does anybody remember which chakras are involved with the clarification of, is it the heart center, solar plexus, and head, or is somehow the ajna center involved? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, the centers involved give you an idea of how it works. So let's say 42, just for the heck of it. All right, here we are. Group number 2, the head, heart, and solar plexus. And take a look at the other group, which has the same chakras as the clarification of consciousness group. Which is it? You see it there, don't you? Number 6. And this is so interesting because one of the most glamour-ridden areas in human expression is the religious area. because it's just filled with wishes and biases and hopes. And the clarification of consciousness area has the same chakras involved. So we really need a big clarification around religion where it is resisted most strenuously, because you're threatening people's existential survival. Religion gives the answer to the question, what's going to happen to me when I die? That's what religion, so everybody's worried about annihilation. It's the fundamental existential fear. Religion gives the answer, and then you come along and you want to clarify that. After people are clinging tenaciously to the particular answer their religion has given them. You're going to paradise, you're going to heaven, you're going here, you're going there, you will survive. It's very difficult to de-glamorize that particular area. Have you noticed that? Have you ever tried to talk esotericism to a religious devotee? It can be a little frustrating. Although I did have a wonderful experience the other day. A fellow sat next to me on the plane, and I saw him studying the Bible. And, he's quite an advanced person, actually. And he's an anesthesiologist. He was going on a mission to Albania, something of that nature, to provide the doctors there with more medical knowledge and so forth. And I realized, that here's a very bright man, probably a sixth-rate soul, very much focused on the Bible, but at that kind of level of intelligence where some of this could begin to make sense. Not just a believer, but a knower and believer sort of together. The idea of being... See, I always find when I'm talking to people who are of the religious persuasion, let's say Christians, I oftentimes use this example. When Christ spoke to the masses, he spoke in parables, right? But to you, he says, I offer the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. So I says there are two approaches to religion. One has to do with the mass approach, and the other has to do with the esoteric secrets behind the mass approach. And I sometimes find that to be an open door. How about you when you discuss with people? Do you try to, are you in any context where you seek to bring esotericism to the intelligent humanity who may be religious or whatever? Do you find yourself doing that? See, there has to be ways to do it, right? Ways to do it. Because otherwise, like, Master Moria says, use the power of suggestion, because if you talk directly to someone, their manas will reject you. He's very direct, Their manas, their vehicle, their mental vehicle will just shove what you say aside. But he says half the world suggests, the other half responds. Or half the world thinks, the other half responds. Okay. Anyway, little diversion, but we're talking about the dangerous familiarity. I have myself dealt in a broad and general way with the subject of initiation in one of my earliest books, Initiation, Human and Solar. Mary Bailey used to call that book a mind splitter, meaning if you had certain conceptions, they were just split apart by reading that little book. Has everybody here read this book, Initiation, Human and Solar? Do you find it a valuable book? I find that there is information in Initiation, Human and Solar which doesn't come from any place else. You're in one of the later books and you're looking, and then a piece of information is missing. You have to go back to Initiation, Human and Solar. Amazing things are said there. And also scattered through all my writings over the years is a mass of information which needs collating and bringing together as a basis for the instruction of disciples in training for initiation. Do you consider yourself a disciple in training for initiation? Do you consider yourself that? Now answer correctly, okay? Because this is a trick question, right? Okay. Because you say, oh no, I couldn't possibly, I couldn't, no. Second ray attitude, oh, not me, no. But anyway, every true disciple is in preparation for initiation. That's what he says. Every disciple is in preparation for the next initiation, whichever it may be, first, second, or third. If it's the fourth, you'll know it, okay? I haven't met too many fourth-degree initiates. I've met a few. They usually have a very tough life for a little while and decide that this qualifies them to be a fourth-degree initiate. I have met some people who have gone through tough situations, and they measure the toughness of their life against the initiatory scale, and they do decide it is the fourth, because one suffers at the fourth, But I try to remind them that the second initiation is perhaps the hardest of all for human beings to take, the one in which they struggle the most. By the time we're taking the fourth degree, we are seeing clear-eyed towards the future, which is not the case with so many of the folks I know. But all of these glamorous things will be taken care of. It's all based on a personal point of view. And that's why DK said earlier in the day, what did he say about decentralization? Decentralization is the open door to what? More knowledge. More knowledge. He says the extent of your knowledge will be according to the extent of your decentralization. That's a point worth remembering, don't you think so? Okay. In Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, I gave out much more upon this subject and also information of a deeply esoteric nature and then the ashrams of the masters. They say these days that the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven are being shouted from the rooftops. That's what it says in the Bible. That's true. It's just that, do people appreciate what's being said? That's the question. See, is a hint if you don't recognize it's a hint? You know what I'm saying? You can be bathed with the most fantastic revelations, but if they're not revelations to you or hints to you, then are they revelations? Not to you, right? All right, so deeply esoteric. The second volume, now he's going to review what he did in his books, which I think is very good because it gives us an idea of how he thinks about his books. The second volume of the book also contains much that is new and should serve to bring the whole subject much closer to public understanding. He's talking here about Dyna 2. Dyna 2. In the instructions now to be given, however, I shall endeavor to cover the ground not already considered and look at the subject of initiation from the angle of the 7 rays. All right, well, we'll get to that page. It's on page 340. It's very important. And cover the subject of initiation from the angle of the 7 rays from the effect upon the centers, planetary and individual, and from the point of view of the esoteric training of the accepted aspirant or disciple. And these instructions, it says, were begun in March 1946 and completed in 1949. Alice Bailey is putting that in. The final volume, and that's what we're studying right now. It's like the climax of the whole teaching, even though it could be said that we have not yet assimilated all of esoteric psychology, all of esoteric astrology, all of esoteric healing. We have not, have we? Okay. And now we're on the final volume, okay. But the University of the 7 Rays has, I think, over the last 20 or more years been attempting to work in the field of esoteric psychology and astrology and to a certain extent of healing. So maybe it's time to begin to develop an overview of this kind of thing. You never can tell what you'll learn. The will to learn covers much. The will to learn almost guarantees that you will learn. Okay, this final volume of a treatise on the 7 rays will eventually change the attitude of men's minds towards the mysteries and towards the activity of spiritual transference, which is one of the basic names given by the masters to the basic mystery of initiation. Isn't that amazing? He's giving us a term for initiation which is not common. What does it mean to you? Spiritual transference. Why should that be associated with initiation? What do you think?
At each initiation, there is an elevation of the force in the centers.
Okay, okay. A transference of forces to higher centers and higher triangles. And also, what about in terms of consciousness? So that, you see, that's the phenomenological aspect of it. This is the matter activity aspect of it. What about the consciousness aspect in relation to the idea of transference? Transference from what to what?
Well, it's up through the planes.
Okay, so every plane is equivalent to a state of consciousness, and we are repolarizing our habitual point of focus or tension on in ever higher dimensions as a result of initiations. So basically, with initiation, you have to achieve a certain level of consciousness. You have to hold it. You have to prove you can hold it. And then you are initiated in a ceremony of confirmation, which takes away the necessity of you having to think about holding that particular level. So initiation plateaus your previously achieved stage of consciousness. Does that make sense? You know, you try and you try and you try and you prove and you can do it, and then comes the rod of power and says, okay, now we fix this in a particular condition, so it is a plateau for you. Now you can spend your consciousness to move further rather than holding that particular state. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm glad to know these hierarchy has different ways of looking at the things that we call by various names. So initiation, spiritual transference. In due time, our educational centers, particularly those concerned with adult education, that's what we're doing, right? Okay, will take into calculation, normally and customarily, the fact of future initiation where their students are concerned. Just as each of us faces, whether in this immediate life or in an immediately following life or so, initiation. We are in training right now for initiation, whichever it may be. And we'll study their graduates from this angle in order to give advice or recommendation. Imagine a counseling center in an advanced school talking about your life path in terms of the initiation which faces you. It'd be a little different, wouldn't it? A little different from the question, well, how are you going to make a living? You know, of course, that's an important question too. But, you know, we see how it goes. The knowledge of the soul will be such that true guidance can be given because the schools will be supervised by masters who actually know. And they will be in touch with the heads of the schools and give their counsel in the matter of the guidance of the students. Are you looking forward to being a member of a new esoteric school in a future incarnation? Please answer correctly. What do you think? Or does it sound a little bit hard? Well, you want to go to the one in Australia? Oh, you want that one? Okay, I actually have my eyes set on Ireland myself. Well, every one of them is Ray schools. You know, every one is a Ray school. I'm not sure about the Ray of the Australian group. I'm not sure. The first Ray schools will be in Egypt and I think Syria or Greece. Russia, 7th Ray school. And then the school in Sweden, since Scandinavia has a strong 7th Ray, has a very strong possibility of being a 7th Ray school. The schools in the United States more along the 6th Ray line, I think. There's some crossover there. The school in France, well, sometimes it's, you know, there's the advanced school and the preparatory school, and do they have the same Ray? I'm not sure. But when I think about the school in France, I think, well, why should it not be a 5th Ray school? But he does tell us that the school in Italy, which is an advanced school, is on what Ray? 3rd Ray. How fascinating. The 3rd Ray Mahachohanic school is in Italy. But you just go back to the Renaissance and you see how the 3rd Ray flourished and you can understand it. Japan has what soul ray? This is a surprise. I think you might find it a surprise when you think about Japan. Well, it has the Scorpio Ray 1 thing. It does, and it has Capricorn. It is Ray 4. Japan has a Ray 4 soul and a 6th Ray personality. At least that's the way it was. I don't know. Sometimes the personality rays change, you know. But there is going to be a very advanced school, he says, in quote-unquote Western China. Sounds a lot like Tibet to me. I don't conceive of it as being a 4th Ray school. So you see that there's, in the East, there's 2 schools, China Advanced and Japan Preparatory. But Japan has the 4th Ray, very strong.
So he calls it China already?
He calls it Western China.
I mean,
he calls it.
Doesn't want to be part of China.
Well, of course, and this was way before any of that happened. This was written, you know, in well, this was written before China really invaded and so forth. It's approximately what?
He probably knew about that.
Yes, I feel that he looked into the future and saw what it would be called. It looks to me like the whole Tibetan system of training is going to be involved in these schools, I think. Anyway, the whole question of what ray goes with what school is not exactly easy to determine, but you can get the, I think, the general idea of it.
But what about California, or what is left of it?
Well, oh, the California Islands, you mean? As they've said. Well, certainly the preparatory school in the Middle West of the United States is a 6th Ray school. You can imagine. You're in the middle of the Bible Belt, you know, in the United States. And so the people coming from the Bible Belt who are a little more progressive, they will go into such a school. Will it be so with the school in the mountains in California? Will it be a 6th Ray school? In other words, does the advanced school and the preparatory school, do they have to share the same ray? That's the question. I don't know. But I'm sure that the United States school will be either a 6th or a 2nd Ray school, correlating with their soul and personality ray. Yeah.
Søren Hauge told us yesterday
Søren Hauge told you
that there was a school in the middle of Oklahoma, which
school in the middle of Oklahoma.
Esoteric learning. Maybe can assist me.
Yeah, it's
and
the.
he was very surprised and said, "Could you imagine in that belt there,
Yeah.
the belt that the school of this kind?"
Can you imagine if there's such a school would
He
have been?
also said that it was welcome in the surrounding. There was no
Yeah.
feelings against the school.
Yeah, very skillfully, Carol Parrish, who is the Light of Christ Community College or church, has, you know, she's really a skillful Aquarian person, Pisces Aquarius person, and she has successfully anchored that kind of 6th Ray school, but it's more than that, you know, but it basically is in that 6th Ray area, and she has, the people that she produces are ministers in the New Age church. So that could be the seed. That could be the seed. I've been there a number of times. It's a good. Oh yeah, I know all about it. I know Carol well, and a lot of the people who attend because they want to be ministers, coming out of that area, right? They have a very strong 6th Ray.
Where is the home? Is that?
Tahlequah. It's in a beautiful area, sort of in the hills of Oklahoma. And I guess you fly into Tulsa and then drive for an hour and a half or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so anyway, look, this is our destination. In future years, those of us who are really interested in affiliating with the hierarchy more closely through esoteric education will pass through these schools, which we're attempting now to start in some small way. And he said, experiments can be made and there can be efforts made that will lead to the schools in the United States. In Australia, he particularly talked about those, United States and Australia. Okay. Anyway, look, you know, we're part of a big educational movement here. This movement is hierarchically planned, and we have to learn what it is and how best to cooperate with it and try to keep the glamour out of it so we keep everything in proportion. If you have a state of consciousness in which your consciousness is fairly proportionate, and you're not exaggerating and minimizing and all of that, distorting, there is a chance that you can escape from the usual glamours that hover around these subjects. It will be apparent to you that this long treatise is in the nature of a preparatory thesis covering a vast field or area of information. And what does he mean by that? Does he mean that when he comes out again after 2025, that to which the treatise on the 7 rays in its 5 volumes was preparation is now going to be given more fully, new information more fully given now that the preparation has been laid? The first 2 volumes dealt with the 7-fold nature of man and with the influence of the 7 basic energies or rays upon his unfoldment and his history, and in a briefer manner upon the world in which he lives and upon the environment which aids and conditions him. What books is he talking about here? What books is he talking about in this great thesis, this preparatory thesis? You know what it is, right? Esoteric Psychology 1 and 2. Okay. In the 3rd volume, we took into consideration the influences of the constellations and planets upon the man and upon our planet, the Earth, and gave much time to the consideration of esoteric astrology. And we've all been through a lot of training on that, right? Okay. The rays, the signs, the constellations, and the planets are all of them closely interrelated. And the human being is the recipient of the energies and forces which they emanate or distribute. This makes the man what he essentially is at any one time whilst in incarnation. You know, the progressions, the transits, the directions working upon you pretty much condition us, make us what we are. So we've studied astrology together too. And as we talk about everything, we weave astrology into the picture, don't we? I mean, you know, it's part of our thinking, is it not? We next considered the subject of healing because of the necessity of understanding the limitations, psychological and physical, which restrict man's free expression of divinity. Isn't that interesting? It's a very Saturnian study, isn't it? He basically is saying healing is about the limitations that we experience in our expression. Do you find that to be the case? You know, when you get stopped, Saturn is involved, right? I mean, you can become sick for any reason, for any planetary reason. But in general, it's a restriction upon your full expression through your vehicle, isn't it? Disease is that, isn't it? We dealt with a major condition which has to be faced and comprehended if humanity is ever to step off the ordinary path of evolution onto the path of discipleship and initiation. Man has to become aware of the ray effects, of the place and the center's play in his advance and unfoldment, and of the play of energies and forces which produce difficulties and the diseases, and can at any time cure them and bring about the liberation of the man. So the rays cause disease, and the right use of the rays cures disease. Do you remember in esoteric healing how he talks about the fact that the ray lords are not perfect yet? And because they're not perfect, we get sick. That, you know, blame it on them. Okay. You may remember that. You know, I'll just give you an example. I'll give you an example of this. Let's go to this interesting section. Why you get sick on the 2nd ray. I'm going to deal with that, right? Okay. Yeah, time. All right. Here it is. So here's the Ray Lord. He's not perfect yet. The Great One poured his life throughout all parts and every aspect of manifestation. From the center to the periphery and from the periphery to the center, he rushed, carrying abundance of life, energizing all forms of himself, producing excess of movement, endless extension, abundant growth, and undue haste. Sounds a lot like Jupiter, doesn't it? He knew not what he wanted because he wanted all, desired all, attracted all, and gave to all too much. Sounds like Jupiter, doesn't it? It's the 2nd ray Lord, right? Okay, so now that's from the old commentary, and then he says, and this leads to the following diseases. The imperfection of this great energy, with its building, vitalizing, and cohering potency, was and is the power to overstimulate, the power to overstimulate. Like when you come to these classes, you get overstimulated, right? Okay. Anyway, the power to overstimulate, or at least a headache. You've got to leave with at least a headache. All right. He says here, excuse me, the imperfection, the power to overstimulate, to produce accretion, which means gathering things together too much, to pile together, to build too many forms, to attract too many atoms, and to bring about those conditions which lead to what has been called esoterically the suffocation of the life. These are the second-ray diseases, the suffocation of the life. Another form of dying, but dying this time as a result of excessive vitality affecting the bloodstream, building within the forms already built, and frequently creating an etheric vehicle which is too potent for the outer exoteric physical form. Other results are, for instance, the appearance of tumors, cancers, growths, and the overdevelopment of bodily aspects over large organs and extra supernumerary bodily parts. Like if you have 10 fingers on each hand, that kind of thing. So every one of these imperfect gods creates diseases according to its own imperfection. And we can't escape from this, being on a particular ray, until we master the technique of healing which is appropriate to this particular ray. So basically DK is saying, okay, we have to become aware of the ray effects and the place the centers play in his advance and unfoldment, and the play of energies and forces which produce difficulties and diseases, and can at the same time cure them and bring about the liberation of man. Because if you've got a disease caused by the second ray, we need a more advanced second ray technique to cure the disease, and thus it goes for all the rays. Yeah.
Which ray lord are we talking about here?
Second ray lord. Second ray lord. Running around, and giving too much. Here, would you like a drop of water? Try a pail. Pail of water is very good, you know. It's like this. Would you please fill my cup? You know, it's like that. Sometimes we may feel that way when we read Master DK. So I just wanted to study a little. Now I've got 24 books, you know. What do I do now? All right.
We really need the cold, clear glass.
Exactly. And a sense of proportion and not over-giving. See, what does the Christ say? I am come so that you may have life more abundant, right? But you can be darn sure he's going to measure carefully what he gives. It's not like, we've sometimes heard in relation to second-rate types that their class was like an information dump. The word dump is, I think, very good. Here it is. Here's the whole pail, you know. I hope you're not experiencing that right now. Okay. All right. So anyway, this is the story with the Ray Lords and what goes wrong with us. So we're discussing here our limitations, the limitations of the form, and how to relieve those limitations so the inner being can express more successfully and fully. This is what we're after. Because all of us have limitations. We absolutely, and they stop the full expression of what we are as a soul. So in esoteric healing, we learn how to relieve some of those things, especially the worst ones, right? Okay. So anyway, this teaching has carried all that has hitherto been given. See, it says, I gave you the new teaching and the antikarana, or the mode and method whereby the initiate could relate in one great fusion, or at one moment, not only the soul and personality, but monad, soul, and personality. This teaching has carried all that has hitherto been given down the ages another step further on and indicated the next stage of development ahead of the disciple. We've been given this. The time has come, as the hierarchy had foreseen, for further light upon the endless way. When you read the words endless way, what thought comes to you? Further light upon the endless way. Endless way. I mean, there are the ray paths, right? We all evolve through the paths of initiation by our rays. But what about the endless way? What does that suggest? Because in this book, a little later, it deals with the next step upon the endless way.
The way of holy.
Okay, okay, and it all depends how we define home. Because for some people, home means the monad. And the endless way begins when you reach the monad, and the monad becomes the traveler, the adventurer, at the sixth initiation, and we take off upon what is called, you know this, the way of higher evolution, right? The way of higher evolution, and he says you can go in 7 or 9 directions on the way of higher evolution, and even that is not the endless way. That's just another step upon the endless way. Does it all seem too big? I mean, you know, when you think about our problems, you know, our daily issues and all the things we get upset about, the financial condition in the world, and we have many, many temporary problems, but this is all meant to liberate humanity so that it can begin to tread this path in a conscious manner. Okay, any thoughts or questions up to this point? We're kind of reading about what his teaching has intended to give us and what the 5-volume set of a treatise on the 7 rays has given us thus far. Okay? Some of us are particular, you know, some of us were into psychology. Some of us were into astrology. Some of us were into healing. All right, and Master DK says, you've got to be into all of it because it's all touching each other. Everything is aspecting everything else. So please make a synthesis out of all this information he is saying. Does that sound too much? It certainly is, but on the other hand, it can be done. I wonder how long Master DK studied to become as he is. A few thousand years, would you say? He was a great scholar back in 200 AD. If it's true that he was Cleinias, the second-hand man of the right-hand man of Pythagoras, then that takes him back to 2,500 years ago or 2,600 years ago.
Did you say he was Plotinus as well?
I said there is a discussion that he could well have been that. There was the discussion. He ran a school for young people, and he was very charitable, and he wrote these profound treatises. It could be. He said he had 2, how does he put it, European incarnations. That's what he said. 2 European. I forget whether he used the word significant, but anyway, 2 European. He says, most of my lives have been as an Oriental in a male body. And a lot of people that look at DK say, oh yeah, well that's obvious, you know, because of, you know, how he presents. But that is his perspective, you see, so. Okay. All right. How are you doing? Are you not quite asleep yet, or just think, before long, coffee awaits you, right? I know how it is after lunch, you know. It can be very, you know, I know how it is. I used to, when I was doing the PhD classes and it was getting night and people were presenting their projects, I used to have to lean against a wall so I wouldn't fall asleep, you know. I had to actually stand up to listen. So if you feel like standing up, you know, like that, you're welcome to do it. Teaching anent the 5 initiations which confront all aspirants has long been given and has become public property. What 5 initiations are we talking about? First 5? First 5 initiations? Ending with what initiation? What's its name? Yes, obviously ending with the 5th, yes. Interesting name for the 5th initiation. Well, we would think so. We would think so. And there is an element after the crucifixion of resurrection, but the technical name given to the 5th initiation is the revelation. And the technical name given to the 7th initiation is the resurrection, which takes us to the very heights of Shambhala. So, you know, it's a little different approach here. The revelation, the ending of ignorance with respect to the planet, the revelation. Okay, so all of this information has become public property, and what does he say? it has meant very little for most people and nothing at all to the mass of men.
Would you connect the fifth initiation to the sign Pisces or not?
I tend to connect the initiations with various signs. And you can take the fifth initiation in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and I connected with Leo and with the illumination of Leo, to like the rays of the sun dispersing all that we call ignorance. So I've got reasons for connecting various signs with various initiations. He sometimes says the last initiation is sometimes taken in Pisces when you are preparing to enter Shambhala and become a world savior rather than simply a world server in Aquarius. So I think Aquarius is active at all the later initiations, but Pisces at the fifth I think is a good possibility. But Leo is so declarative, the fifth sign of the fifth initiation, with the idea of the revelation of the Son of Wisdom. I think Leo is involved. I'll let you know when I get there, okay?
What did you say about Pisces? With
Well, you see, you have a choice in your sort of last initiation of the series of 1 through 5. Maybe you have, maybe you're already cut out for whatever, but people divide along two lines. They become world servers or they become world saviors. The world saviors are obviously connected with Pisces and with Shambhala, with Pluto and the first ray. So they go to Shambhala. And in those cases, the fifth initiation is much connected with Pisces, whereas otherwise it might be connected with Aquarius. It also has to do, of course, with an entirely new beginning. Aries is involved. And Leo, as the great symbol of illumination, is appropriate at the place where an initiation is called the revelation, the ending of all ignorance, as we know it. Okay, so anyway.
Did you say that Pisces was related to the seasons here?
Well, I can certainly relate Pisces to the fourth, to the second, possibly to the first, not so much to the third initiation, and yes, to the fifth initiation. It's not like one sign per initiation. It's not like that, because there are more ways that the signs can combine to produce the initiations. Look at Ramakrishna. If some of you know about his life, he was obviously a fourth degree initiate, maybe very close to mastership in his own way. And his signs seem to be Aquarius and Pisces together. They are climactic signs of initiation. Some charts show a little Capricorn. Now, Vivekananda, who I would say was more the third degree initiate, he had Capricorn rising. And also the Sun in Capricorn and Venus in Capricorn rising. Perfect for the third initiation. But when we come to the fourth and the fifth, Aquarius and Pisces can be involved. Okay, so anyway, all of this stuff has been given out. And it means nothing at all to the mass of men. It has been regarded by the intelligentsia as vague and visionary nonsense. I'm going to Berlin in 1 month and 2 weeks or so, and I'm going to meet an old friend who is a materialistic philosopher. In other words, his rays are uniquely ray 3 and 5. And I know that he's going to call everything I think about vague and visionary nonsense. I'm getting ready for that trip. It will be interesting. We met each other when we were 7 years old. Now we're 70. And it will be interesting to see how things have progressed. Yes, I mean, when he hears the name Alice Bailey, he turns blue, or maybe green. Green would be better. Okay. Some few have admitted that these initiations may be possible, and others say that they are simply symbolic modes of indicating some final achievement which mankind faces. Still others have accepted this teaching and have come to regard the initiations as goals and have then taken the necessary steps to prove the veridical nature of their beliefs. Veridical means true, the truthful nature of their beliefs. Where do we number ourselves? Are we among this last category? What do you think? Do we take these initiation as goals, and do we attempt to prove within ourselves that they are true? Is this so? By the time we finish reading this book, it must be so. Don't you think? Okay. Yes, that's right. I like to think so, yes. They have proved it. Some of them have become initiate and have attained the status of master of the wisdom and have taken their place within the hierarchy. Now, can we be members of the hierarchy before we are masters of the wisdom? In a way, yes. You've seen the hierarchical circle, and even disciples and initiates of the first degree and aspirants are included within the big blue circle. You've seen that, haven't you? I'll go there. There's the big blue circle. Here it is. And you are there. Oops, that's pretty big. It's a big blue circle, and here it is. We're at the bottom of the barrel, of course, but we're still considered within the blue circle of hierarchy. But a true member of hierarchy, again, is a fifth degree initiate. 4 grades of initiations, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then come the actual masters who get big circles of their own rather than small blueprint. Okay? So we're on our way up. Even people on the probationary path are considered within the blue circle because they have reoriented themselves towards the soul. But take a look. There's another circle here, and it is of another color. Keith Bailey did these colors, and well, not here it isn't, but I've seen it somewhere else. It's a red circle. And the red circle, here it is, here it is. The red circle shows us something different. It includes something else, doesn't it? It's kind of red anyway. The red circle includes Shambhala. Are you a member of Shambhala? Trick question. Are you a member of Shambhala?
We're a member of the entire universe.
Oh my God. The ultimate evasion. Yes, we are members of Shambhala in what aspect of our nature? Monadic nature. There we are members of the center of will. And what's interesting, of course, is Shambhala includes the 7th plane as well as the 6th. So don't think that forever as a monad you will be confined to the 6th plane. You will make your escape into higher levels. But all of that seems quite distant. Still, it's very important. When people are thinking, oh, I want to go to heaven, oh, I want to go to paradise, I, it's important to give a more realistic vision of the goal that is possible to human beings. It's much bigger than what they think. The mind has been very limited for a long time. Okay, now, moving on. So some have become masters of the wisdom. I just have to ask, would you like to be a master of the wisdom? Wait a second, let me put on my glasses. Hold on, I just want to see what the response is here. Would you like to become a master of the wisdom? And if so, why? Well,
it comes with a lot of responsibility. No?
It seems to, and your time just isn't your own on that job, The story of Master Moria rushing into a room, taking off one hat, putting on another, and rushing out. I mean, it is a story of very heavy responsibility, sort of like who are those who are helping Atlas hold up the world? In the Labors of Hercules from Gemini, Hercules finally runs into Atlas, who's struggling holding up the world. Who is Atlas? In one way, it's kind of the planetary logos, but in another way, it's the symbol for the masters of the wisdom. And as soon as he says, here, Atlas, let me give you a hand, then the golden of the apples of the Hesperides appear and come into his hands naturally. So again, when people are willing to simply serve, knowledge comes. So I'm taking it as a yes. I'm taking that as a yes, that you would like to be a master of the wisdom. Is that fair enough? How, and just, there was a time when I used to think I'd be called Master G for garlic, but then I gave that up. And eating much less garlic, I have to rechange my name. You don't know whether to take me seriously, do you? Anyway, you can start thinking about your mastership later. All right.
I thought you were for MM.
MF?
MM.
MM. What was that? M&M's? Master Mike. Master Mike. Yeah, I have a singing group called Mike and the Monads. Yeah, I'm just getting into that. We don't know, but it's kind of interesting what names people take, It may have something to do with the environment that they've emerged from before their mastership. The name Joel Kuhl is not real. It's a derivation. There's a secret behind that particular name. Keith and I discussed this maybe 20 years ago. Then I said, Keith, remember when you told me your opinion about how Master DK's name was derived? Would you repeat that? That was 10 years ago. He says, oh, I never said that. I haven't the slightest idea. What do you mean? Nothing. Then I asked him again a few days ago. He said, oh, yes, I know. So I'm waiting to get his opinion about the derivation of Master DK's name, because at the time I didn't write it down. And I thought it was very interesting how this Joel Kuhl came together, because no Tibetans recognize any Joel Kuhl. There's no Joel Kuhl there. It's some other, it's a pseudonym which carries information to those who know how it was derived. He's known by other names. When I was in Washington at the Dalai Lama's Kalachakra, it seemed clear to me that of the 17 Tibetan sages that they consider as a very important part of their tradition, and every one of them did something really, really important, that Master DK was one of the earlier ones under the name Arya Sangha. You maybe have heard of Arya Sangha. And he apparently succeeded in contacting what they call the Tushita heaven and carried information from Lord Maitreya, which seems, quite possible. So anyway, it's all one big happy family. And the interconnections that we are involved with, we will learn about. Kuthumi, I think there's another name for Kuthumi in those early Buddhist scholar days. Oh, and why can't I think of it? I have Arya Sangha on the tip of my tongue. I know what that is. And anyway, another one of the famous Buddhist scholars from that time, as well as Pythagoras earlier. We know that. I don't think it's correct when people say St. Francis and Kuthumi were the same. I think a different ray and a different orientation are involved. When I think of St. Francis, I think of the sixth ray soul, probably second ray monad. When it comes to Kuthumi, it's definitely a second ray soul. Why can't I think of it? Well, I'll try to later. I have rethought of it many times, and it's always on my Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna. And Naga is the serpent revealer, the initiate. Naga is the serpent of revelation. Arjuna is the warrior. Nagarjuna. They all take those names, which have specific meanings in their traditions. So do the Hindu swamis, Swami Satchidananda, Vivekananda, all those kind of things. They have certain words that they take names for, which characterize their approach to divinity. If you take the name Viveka, what do you think you will emphasize? Viveka. Any idea? It's a specific term involving Saturn and Mercury. Discrimination. Discrimination between the real and the unreal. That's Viveka. Ananda is bliss. Sat is being. Chit is mind stuff. Arjuna is the warrior. Various combinations of names along those lines. Swami Vivekananda. Viveka-ananda. The bliss of successful discrimination between the real and the unreal. That's what Viveka is all about. Okay. What is real? Okay. So, there is therefore a certain familiarity about these goals in the mind of men, the service they could entail in the consummation of the hierarchical possibilities. This itself indicates that the time had come when certain faint indications of that which lies behind the mysteries and of that which is to be seen ahead of those who have achieved initiation should be somewhat clarified. I have therefore started to impart 3 phases of information. And so he's going to tell us about the 7 cosmic paths, which when we are initiates of the 6th degree now, we will choose one of those paths. And that's what lies behind the mysteries and lies ahead of our very own masters of the wisdom. Are there any thoughts about this or anything we've said up to this point? It's we're laying out the exposition of these things. Does it seem graspable, at least with the mind? This is the point. Because even though we can't measure up and say we can do these things, at least we can get the concept. Does it seem graspable? Apprehensible? What do you think? Or would a nap be better? What do you think? Hello. Of course, you know my answer to the question. With sufficient study, it is graspable, isn't it? Do we want to grasp these things? Do we care? Do we want a bigger and bigger picture of the world so we can see where we fit? And I would say, why not? Why not? It's an antidote to the prevailing ignorance born of a distorted point of view. Okay? I know it's almost time. My goodness. Oh, my goodness. Well, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Venus will have to wait. Okay. And by that I mean Danish, pastry, that is. I therefore started to impart 3 phases of information. Whoops. Uh-oh. It just disappeared. Do you think it was meant to disappear? No, don't worry about it. Okay. No. Ba-bum, ba-bum. You don't hear what I'm hearing, I guess. Okay. I'm hearing musical notes. All right, so what did he do? I gave out teaching which indicated the mode. He's reviewing his teaching, so it helps us know what he thinks he's done for us. So we can say, okay, do I realize this? I gave out teaching which indicated the mode of bridging the gap between the 3 lower worlds and the world of the spiritual triad. In doing this, it became apparent that there were 3 groupings or levels which had to be recognized. Okay, so what is this teaching of bridging? What kind of teaching is it? The teaching on what is the mode of bridging between the 3 lower worlds and the spiritual triad? You know this. You know this. You know the word. It begins with an A. Antikarana. Antikarana. The Antikarana teaching. You know her. She comes to visit. Antikarana. She comes to visit. This is the method of bridging. Okay. It became apparent that there were 3 levels of consciousness which had to be recognized. First, the 3 worlds of human evolution. This is common. Mental, astral, physical plane. Next, the 3 levels of the mental plane. They have to be bridged too, right? The level of the concretizing mind. Sometimes it's called the concrete mind, but I think this is better, isn't it? Because it gives you the dynamic process. The concretizing mind, the lower mind, the level on which the soul is to be found, and the level of the abstract or higher mind. These 3 levels have to be bridged. And you may notice when you look at this particular, okay, let's see here, this particular diagram, that the Antikarana takes shape in form of a triangle. Do you see that? The normal antikarana we talk about is this, but aspects of the antikarana connect the permanent atom with the center of the egoic lotus, and the center of the egoic lotus with the the mental unit with the center of the egoic lotus, and the center of the egoic lotus with the monastic permanent atom. That whole thing is the antikarana. So why should we want to build the antikarana anyway? What is our motive in doing so? What do we think we will benefit from doing so? Why? What will we gain? How would we put that in words? The gain of building the antikarana. What can we touch that we couldn't touch without it?
So,
Well, okay, I'm glad you said that, because in a way, only this part of the antikarana deals with touching the soul. See what I'm saying? This is the first part, which is built by those people who are attempting to contact the soul in meditation. But usually what we call the antikarana doesn't deal so much with touching the soul as it deals with making the bridge between the spiritual triad and the personality. In other words, the universal point of view. That's what we can touch. See, the human being is separated into two parts. One part is spiritual, the other part is very material, and we need this bridge to connect these two things. This is a new teaching, really. I mean, at least new to people like ourselves. Okay, so the three levels of the mental plane, and then the three worlds of superhuman evolution, the levels of the spiritual triad, Atma, Buddhi, Manas. We are bridging all these things. The lower personality, the three levels of mind, and the three levels of the spiritual triad. We are bridging these things, and we've left one thing out because the antikarana also touches one more center, and what is that? What else does the antikarana touch? It touches, goes from the personality, bypassing the soul, but somehow connecting with it. It goes into the spiritual triad, and then what else? Monadic, the antikarana is meant to touch the monad, so that pure being comes in touch with all we are on the lower planes. And one of the meditations he gives does that exactly. When we practice meditation number 3, we get that, the connection with with pure being, with the monad. Okay. Between the higher 3 and the lower 3 and embracing the mental plane was a definite gap. In other words, there's a gap in consciousness. We don't know what we are on the higher levels, and we have to be restored to knowing what we are on the higher levels. He says a break in the continuity of conscious contact, or an area where there was no channeling. That's the problem. That's why we have to build it. There was no channeling for the inpouring of the higher energies. So we were not all together. We were not truly integrated spiritual soul personal beings. There was a break. That's why we have to address ourselves to this. Well, you can just ask yourself, how often do you know yourself to be the mind of God, the heart of God, the will of God? How often do you know that? How often do you know yourself to be the one? How often does it happen? There's a gap. There's a break. And what we're trying to do now is overcome that, so we know ourselves to be what we are in the higher levels of our being. You see where this is going? You understand, why is this considered advanced teaching? Why are we dealing here with advanced teaching, whereas some of his other teaching is not as advanced? What is it about this that makes it more advanced? What do you think? I know you think something. What do you think?
Some of the first books are indicating the personality. Here it's a higher level.
You know, a lot of the early textbooks deal with how to get the personality in shape so that it can contact the soul, be infused by the soul, be inspired by the soul, work with the soul. In this textbook, we have moved beyond that. I mean, are we ready to do that? Who's to say? But for many years, some of us have studied the earlier method, haven't we? We have studied the method of how to purify, recondition the personality so that, you know, the right diet and the right morality and the right kind of activity so that we become useful to the soul. But is this about that? Not really anymore. There's more to it, isn't there? It's not just usefulness to the soul, it's usefulness to the hierarchy, usefulness to Sanat Kumara, usefulness to the planetary logos. That's the curriculum we're talking about now. So, you know, it's not too far a stretch. We can say, oh my God, I can't. But if VK gave it, he knows that we can assimilate it to a degree, okay? So it's a big stretch. It's one of the higher levels of adult education, okay? You see, remember how we talked about adult education? We are involved in a rather high form of adult education here. And it is within our reach to understand these concepts. You say, well, a lot of people out there, they just don't care. Well, then our question is, do we care? And if we care and if we live our life, then there will be people around us who begin to care also. And that's how this teaching will be passed on. Okay, so there was a gap. That gap still exists for most of us because we have not built a successful Antakarana yet. So here the teaching of the conscious building of the Antakarana was required, and thus the gap between the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom, between the personality indwelt by the soul, because it is the soul-infused personality that builds the Antakarana, and the spiritual triad could be bridged by the aspirant himself, our own effort to make the bridge and become far more than we think we are. Can you understand, I think so, how it is that the building of the Antakarana relates to the coming of life more abundant into our lives? Because it's like endless riches of spiritual energy in these higher worlds, which we couldn't touch before. So that's where our meditation comes in. That's what our meditation is an attempt to do, to touch these higher planes where all kinds of realizations and powers exist which can enrich the life tremendously and make the person a much better server in the long run. And okay. Are there any questions to this point? At 3:30 we will take our break. Are there any questions to this point? Okay, so he's saying here he gave out a teaching which is all about bridging gaps. That's number one. I mean, do you feel yourself like an altogether, put together, integrated energy system? Of course, you can say, okay, look, I'm an integrated personality. Okay, yes, maybe you are, but that's just 1/3 of the energy system, isn't it? So he's teaching us here how to put all the parts of our energy system together. So from the top to the bottom, from the crown to the base, we are a unified being. And then comes the power, of course, because in unification comes power. Right? Okay, here I'll tell you what. Here, I'll give this to you. You read this one, number 2.
I found it necessary also to indicate the nature of the way of the higher evolution, which had been hinted at, but about which absolutely no information had been given. It is the way which opens out before the master of the wisdom, leading to states of identification and levels of awareness which lie outside our planetary sphere altogether.
Mm-hmm.
The following of this way enables the master to abstract himself from the 7 planes of our planetary life and divest himself of all we understand as material existence. Forget not that our 7 planes are only the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane.
So, I have a question, where do you go to get trained to be a solar angel? Sirius, yes. And maybe with a stop on Venus first, I've often thought. So, do you think that the beings who are now our solar angels, do you think they've been trained on Sirius? In other words, when the last solar system was over, or at some point in the last solar system, where they were advanced human beings or initiates, do you think they went to Sirius to be trained as solar angels? I mean, it's obviously a speculation, isn't it? But perhaps they did. So, do you think that if they went to Sirius to be trained, that they were able to escape the 7 planes of our planetary life, to be rid of material existence, and to travel on the cosmic astral plane? What do you think? See what I mean? These beings may have already left our whole cosmic physical plane in order to reach Sirius to be trained as solar angels. Now, even the Christ has not left the cosmic physical plane. And yet we're talking about these beings being part of our nature who may have left behind them the cosmic physical plane. So they're very high beings indeed. Very interesting.
Something,
They are what?
don't they need to have left the aspect of the plane because they are coming with the manners?
Oh.
They are coming with manners to this world.
Okay. I just lost the word. They're coming with
Manners.
Manus?
Yes.
Manus, yes. Because Sirius is a great center of Manus.
Yes.
Okay? So, see, Sirius is focused, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but DK tells us that every one of the cosmic paths leads to one or other constellation somewhere. And the cosmic path that leads to Sirius ends on the cosmic astral plane. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that even though these beings are now working with us on the cosmic physical plane, they have already been freed of the cosmic physical plane and have traveled, like some others, on the cosmic astral plane. So it's really interesting, the nature of their sacrifice to come back to the cosmic physical plane in order to serve, because it's a huge descent. The various cosmic paths go either to the cosmic astral plane, the cosmic mental plane, or one path leads to the cosmic Buddhic plane. And this is just a map, but DK has given us this map, and here are these different planes to which the different paths can lead. It's a tremendous expansion of possibility, and our masters, the ones that are working with us, have not even left the cosmic physical plane ever yet. Maybe not even the Christ, even though he is attuning. But the solar angels apparently already have. And that's very interesting when you compare their status. You see, the solar angels were the members of a humanity that existed in the previous solar system. Now, most human beings today became human beings in this solar system. A very few were the low-level human beings who existed in the previous solar system. And they came over as nomads, you know, the wandering nomad and so forth. Do you have a question?
In between lives, where do majority of humanity exist?
Now, which lives do you mean? In between lives, where
Earth
the majority?
lives,
Earth lives.
physical incarnation.
The majority of human beings spend the majority of their inter-incarnational time on the astral plane.
In terms of this scheme,
Down here.
but
Some human beings go to heaven. Yeah.
while incarnated, they exist on the mental plane. So you're saying that
No. They still have their mental body.
Yeah.
But they are focused in the particular area that we call the astral plane because those are where the lower heaven worlds are found. Like he says, the heaven of the average Christian or believer is found where? Do you remember? The heaven of the average Christian or believer is found here, on the third subplane of the astral plane. Now there's a higher heaven for some more intelligent people, but the average believer, after death, spends them, even though they have a mind, they're not focused mentally. They just use their mind in still an emotional astral way.
So you're saying the second and first subplane of the astral plane?
Third.
Third.
Where is hell? Now this is a very good question.
Seventh.
Hell is on the seventh subplane of the astral plane. And that's why he says we shouldn't have any particles of that type of matter in our system.
So those who are polarized in their mental body,
They go to Devachan, which is on the fourth subplane of the mental plane. And then when all of that dissolves, the jiva, the incarnating unit, goes back to its centralization within the egoic lotus, preparing for a new descent into incarnation that's always taken from the egoic lotus. Now, DK said an interesting thing. There are some disciples who achieve continuity of consciousness in this life. They have a connection between the physical and astral plane, sort of at will, and they need not destroy their astral and mental body before taking incarnation again. They can return with the same mental body, the same astral body, into incarnation directly without dissolving those vehicles. And that's a particular form of service, and it means very rapid reincarnation. So that is an opportunity offered later on in the process. Okay, but Devachan is the highest level of illusion, and it's not without purpose. What is the purpose of Devachan? Devachan. It's not just to have a good time, which you do have, you know, because all unhappiness is banished and all fulfillment of your faculties is possible. What happens in Devachan? We've discussed this maybe when we were discussing a treatise on white magic. What is the purpose of Devachan? What do you think? Does it have anything to do with future lives, with improving yourself, and so forth? Doesn't it? Does it not? The building in of new faculty based on your previous experience. So you actually build abilities in Devachan which can be used in your next incarnations. So, you know, you say, well, does everything have to be done right here on this planet? In other words, is there a direct continuity between what I was in a previous life and what I am in this life? And the only improvement can come in the physical life? No. Improvement can come in Devachan, where you actually improve your condition and return to the next life in a much higher state. So do you want to go to Devachan? Because I'm selling tickets. You want to go to Devachan? Because, because he says, okay, some people need not go to Devachan. They can forego that if they have built in sufficient faculty, will, and sacrifice. They can come right back into this world right away and keep on working. What do you prefer? Martha wants to come right back. No Devachan for Martha, right? Okay. Well, because Devachan is fun. Devachan is like bliss. Devachan, no worldly misery can intrude in the Devachan experience. So it is a bit of a sacrifice to give up Devachan. But he says increasingly disciples in the modern world are doing that, coming back right away. That could mean that you could participate in the play-out of these last 100 years of the Piscean age. You could come back right away. Do you prefer that? Could be a little unpleasant. Okay. Anyway, these are the choices that face us following death. Okay. All right.
So in general, you end up where you were in incarnation.
Well, you leave in the, what do they say? You come back in the same sign for continuity in which we're in die. That's one thing said. But you build up additional faculties so you are in an improved state when you return. Most people do that. Most people go to Devachan or some heaven equivalent. They work out their desires. They build up their aspirations. The things they wanted to do and couldn't do, they piece together and do. They come back in an improved state. But the poor disciples who return immediately, they come back pretty much the way they were. So that's the sacrifice, you see. Okay, anyway.
You come back at the same time we were born or the same time we died?
Well, you know how DK tells us that the month in which we depart life is the month in which we return. He uses the word month. But, does that mean the same astrological sign, or does it mean month? What does it mean? He says we take up the continuity from where we left it before. So your birth sign, if you're Pisces, according to this method of interpretation, it means you left your last incarnation in Pisces. And sometimes it's interesting to study where people die from that perspective. Like Asgard, he died on the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. I'm not exactly, Finn knows the exact time. It was just right there on the cusp. So does that mean, that he will resume his next incarnation as Aquarius or Capricorn, But that's the hint.
But it doesn't
not Pisces.
It doesn't fit with Dalai Lama's several charts that we worked with.
You mean the previous Dalai Lama? Yeah, I can't say anything about that. It's a theory. He puts it out in Treatise on White Magic, and he says, you come back in the month you die. He says that. Now, the question is the Dalai Lama the same individual? Is it? Or is it a chosen individual overshadowed by what, the Buddha of compassion or Avalokiteshvara or something like that? In other words, is every Dalai Lama overshadowed by a higher type of, the same higher type of being? Is he a channel for compassion or whatever? So that's a question. Look, until we get accurate reincarnational research, we're in the dark here. And it doesn't exist. You can't get two psychics to agree on anything. So obviously that's where Master Hilarion has a very big job. He's a fifth-ray master trying to train sixth-ray people to be more scientific about their psychism. It's a big job. We're a long way from scientific accuracy about the subtle worlds, aren't we? All right, this third point, and then, I know you need to. I know you do. All right. So anyway, point 3. I therefore opened up the subject of the possibility of the higher initiations which confront the members of the hierarchy. In this connection, it is useful to remember now what initiation is facing the Christ. He achieved the sixth initiation with Master Jesus. He would simply be a Chohan if he had taken the sixth only. So he began the seventh initiation. What initiation is facing the Buddha? Well, you could say so, and it will be. But he has, with the Christ, he too began the seventh initiation and has to complete that initiation. So here are our world teachers way up there on these higher planes. This is where they're focused, up there on the Logort plane, and we're still trying to not lose our temper here on the astral plane. So there is a bit of a gap, but rapid progress is now more possible than ever before. Okay. Because after all, there's been a lot of retardation, but now comes the possibility of a real sweep forward because our planetary logos is taking initiation, and with him we will take initiation too. Okay, so he opened up the subject of the higher initiations. He talked about how do we link up top to bottom. What are the what is the way of the higher evolution? And what are the initiations lying before the great ones themselves? Really big picture stuff, big picture. Okay, so he says here that in this connection it's useful to remember that. And here he goes. The council chamber at Shambhala provides a goal for members of the hierarchy, but not an abiding place. What could that mean? A goal, but not an abiding place. So obviously it's temporary, isn't it? For any members of the hierarchy, is Shambhala a kind of abiding place? They will, but certain members, when a Sanat Kumara comes up to you and taps you on the shoulder and says, you, okay, so the members of the path of earth service, they stay with Shambhala a much longer time. How long has Hercules been with Shambhala? Millions of years. Hercules was a great Atlantean initiate. He's still with Shambhala. Why is that? What about where's the Buddha right now? Where is he? He's in Shambhala. And the Christ has access to Shambhala. See, so the initiates on the path of earth service, they stay back. Not that they necessarily say, okay, I volunteer, but Sanat Kumara reserves the right to retain a certain number of them, to stay with Shambhala and to serve in that way. The rest have the objective of reaching the Shambhalic state of consciousness, a Chohanic state of consciousness, but they choose to move on. There are 8 other paths that they can take. I know some people that have already decided on their path. Okay, it's a personality decision, but, you know, they think they know where they're going. Okay, I think, you know, it's probably not until we're masters of the wisdom we have any real idea where we came from, so which way we're supposed to return. DK, you know, says the Buddha chose incorrectly. At the 6th degree, he was not supposed to stay on earth. He was supposed to go to Sirius, but he didn't. And now DK says he probably won't go to Sirius anymore. Probably some other path will take his direction. He made a mistake because he loved humanity so much. So this is interesting that the second aspect of divinity can cause you to make mistakes with respect to the will aspect. Most of us don't have that particular problem. Our problem is that the intelligence aspect prevents us from choosing rightly in connection with love, not the other way around. Okay. So anyway, I'm just finishing this little bit here. He opened up the subject of the higher initiations. The 7 paths which stretch out before a master are entered by the treading of the way of higher evolution. I call this the WHE, way of higher evolution. You can use the so-called 3rd initiation. The transfiguration is only the first major initiation from the standpoint of hierarchy. It marks the moment in time and space when the initiate truly sees for the first time the door which opens up to this higher way. So when you become a humble disciple in relation to the star Sirius, at the 3rd initiation, you catch a glimpse of the way of higher evolution. So that's not such a long wait, is it? Even though we may not decide until 3 initiations later at the 6th degree. Then, if he chooses that path that the Christ chose, and there is no reason that he should, he will set his face to go up to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is Shambhala, and he will choose the path of the world saviors. These are some of the things which I've hinted at in my past writings. They have been touched upon vaguely and mysteriously by past teachers, and somewhat more, a lot more, I would say, explicitly by myself. Whoops, I just erased the whole thing. Oh, maybe I didn't. Okay. All right. I propose to be a little more definite in this new section. Okay, good. So now we can, are there any questions up to this point? Do you mind having your mind stretched in this way? This is definitely a stretch, isn't it? Think about what we normally think about. And now what we're being asked to think about here, it's such a great expansion. But you know how it is, if you keep stretching the mind enough, it may stay that way. Usually we have a certain elasticity factor. It just bounces back. And oh yes, and now we're back to where we were. But with repeated stretching, the mind can begin to embrace these higher things. And DK would say, don't let anything get in the way of living this higher life and having these higher realizations. He says, nothing is worth it. This is worth everything. And that's from the perspective that he sees it. So even though it seems like, the other side of the rainbow to us, it is where he wants us to go. Okay, well now you somehow deserve a break. I just feel with deep compassion the need for a break. And coffee. Yes, coffee. Okay. All right, very good. We take a little break. Okay. Okay, and friends, some of you are here asleep, not asleep, I'm not sure, but some of you are with us. Hey, Stephen Renneberg. Okay, you are SR. Okay, hi, Stephen. Been a long time. Nice to see you. Okay. Now I understand. And my wife is there too as wife Robin. Sounds familiar. Nice to see you all, and we'll give you a chance a little later in the day to speak up anything that you may want to summarize or think about or offer a comment. With this type of format, it's not really possible to have interaction from everybody out there in the field because this is designed as a class, particularly, in which we can have listeners and so forth, and you'll be able to say a little something later as we go on. Other webinars that I do are interactive, and whoever is on the webinar is a participant, a more active vocal participant in the process. All right, well, we'll take a little break here. I'll turn off all these recording devices. And we'll take a 15 or so minute break and hope for the best, okay? Very good.